In this lecture, let's concentrate on control flow and looping concepts in Python. In this section, we will learn how to use control statements such as if, elif, else, understanding looping concepts using for and while, and also understand how to use break, continue, and pass control statements. See the description section for more details. Let's start with the concepts now. So let us first understand what are if-else statement in Python. Decisions in a program are used when the program has conditional choices to execute code block. Decision making is required when we want to execute a code only if a certain condition is satisfied. The if, elif, else statements is used in Python for decision making. It is the prediction of conditions that occur while executing a program to specify actions. Multiple expressions get evaluated with an outcome of either true or false. These are logical decisions, and Python also provides decision-making statements that to make decision within a program for an application based on the user requirement. Conditional statements in Python perform different computations or actions depending on whether a specific Boolean constraint evaluates to true or false. Conditional statements are handled by if statements in Python. So the Python if statement is a statement which is used to test specified condition. We can use if statement to perform conditional operations in our Python application. The if statement executes only when specified condition is true. So these are various types of if statements in Python. We can use just if statement to execute a specific block depending upon the condition, or else we can use if else statement and also nested if statement. Let's understand all these concepts one after the other. Let's begin with if statements. If statement consists of Boolean expression which results in either true or false followed by one or more statements. This is the Python if statement syntax. Here, the program evaluates the test expression and will execute statements only if the text expression is true. Here, the test expression is Boolean expression and it returns either true or false. If the test expression is false, the statement is not executed. In Python, the body of the if statement is indicated by the indentation. Body starts with an indentation and first unindented line marks the end. Python interprets non-zero values as true and none and zero are interpreted as false. This is how we can represent the flowchart for if statement. Let's analyze the flowchart. Here the program evaluates the test expression and will execute statements. That is the body of the if block only if the test expression is true. Here the test expression is Boolean expression and it returns true or false. If the test expression is false, the body is not executed. Python interprets non-zero values as true, as I have already mentioned, and none and zero are interpreted as false. If the test expression is evaluated to false, then it continues with the unindented statements. Let's understand this with an example. Here, this program will check whether the provided number is positive or not. If the number is positive, then it prints a specific message, else it exits from the if block. In this example, num greater than 0 is the test expression. The body of if is executed only if the expression is evaluated to true. When variable num is equal to 3, text expression is true and body inside the body of if is executed. When variable num is equal to -1, test expression is false because the num is not greater than 0. The body of if is skipped. The print statement falls outside of the if block, that is unindented statement. Hence, this is executed regardless of the test expression. So what we are observing here is basically if checks the expression is true or not. If the expression is true, then the statement inside the if block is executed, else the statements inside the if block is not executed. Let's consider one more example to understand what happens when if condition does not meet. Here in this example, test expression is false and body inside if is skipped. But print var is trying to print the value of a variable that was never declared. Hence we get an error because the var will be declared only if the condition is matching in the if statement. Hence we must be very careful while making the decisions during programming, and such kind of issues can be avoided using else statement. Now let's understand how to use Python if-else statements. The else condition is usually used when you have to judge one statement on the basis of other. If one condition goes wrong, then there should be another condition that should justify the statement or logic. If-else statements also contain a Boolean expression. The if statement is followed by an optional else statement, and if the expression results in false, then else statement gets evaluated. It is also called alternative execution, in which there are two possibilities of condition determined in which any one of them will get executed. So this is the syntax of if-else statement. The if-else statement evaluates test expression and will execute body of if only when test condition is true. If the condition is false, the body of else is executed. As we can see here, indentation is used to separate the blocks. This is how we can represent the flowchart of if-else statement. As we can see here, initially the test expression is evaluated. If the test expression is set to true, then body of the if statement is executed. If the test expression is set to false, then the body of else condition is executed. After the execution of any of these statements, the remaining unindented statements are executed. Let's understand this with an example. Here, this program will check whether the number is positive or negative and displays an appropriate message. As we can see in this example, when num is equal to 3, the test expression is set to true, and body of if is executed and body of else is skipped. As we can see in the output, the print in the if block is executed. But here in this example, the num is set to -3, and if num is equal to -3, the test expression is set to false because the number is not greater than 0, and hence the body of else is executed and the body of if is skipped. As we can see in the output, the print in the else block is executed. Consider one more example. Here in this example, the num is set to 0. If num is equal to 0, the test expression is set to true because we are checking whether the num is greater than or equal to 0. Since the num is equal to 0, this expression will set to true, and hence body of if is executed and body of else is skipped. As we can see in the output, the print in the if block is executed in this particular case. So this is how we can use the if-else block. Now let's understand how to use multiple condition using Elif statement. The Elif is short for else if. It allows us to check for multiple expressions. If the condition for if is false, it checks the condition for the next Elif block. If all the conditions are false, the body of else is executed. So this is the syntax for if, elif, else statements. As we can see in the syntax, it allows us to check for multiple expressions. If the condition for if is false, it checks the condition for the next Elif block and so on. If all the conditions are false, body of else is executed. Only one block among the several if, Elif, else blocks is executed according to the condition. The if block can have only one else block, but it can have multiple Elif blocks. This is how we can represent the if, Elif, else statements through flowchart. As we can see in the flowchart, initially the condition 1 is evaluated. If the condition 1 is set to true, then statement 1 is executed. After the execution of statement 1, then it moves to unindented statement. If the condition 1 is set to false, then it checks the another condition through Elif statement. If the condition 2 is set to true, then the statement 2 is executed and then it continues with the unindented statements. And if it is set to false, then it checks the another condition which is written using Elif block. In this way, it checks n number of blocks, and finally if the last condition is also set to false, then the default statement is executed, which is represented inside else block. Now let's understand this concept with an example. Here this program checks whether the number is positive or negative or 0 and displays an appropriate message. Initially the number is set to a float number which is 11.2 and it checks whether the number is greater than 0. If the number is greater than 0, it will print the positive number. Since the number whatever we have set here is greater than 0, as we can see in the output, the positive number string is printed. And also we can observe in this program there are two conditions. The first condition is written with if statement and the second condition is written with elif statement. Now let's understand what happens when the variable num is set to 0. Here initially it checks whether the number is greater than 0 in the if statement. Since num is not greater than 0, this expression will be set to false. When the expression is set to false, then it moves to elif statement. In the elif statement, it checks whether the number is equal to 0. Since num is equal to 0, this expression will be evaluated to true and hence this will print 0. Here in this example, the num is set to minus 4.5, which is a negative number. What happens in the program is, initially it checks whether the num is greater than 0. Since the num is not greater than 0, this expression will be evaluated to false and it moves to the next condition. In the elif statement, it checks whether the num is equal to 0. Since the num is not equal to 0, then finally it moves to the else block. And hence this particular program will print the string negative number as we can see in the output. Nesting is also possible using if statements. We can have a if, elif, else statement inside another if, elif, else statement. This is called nesting in computer programming. Any number of these statements can be nested inside one another. Indentation is the only way to figure out the level of nesting. This can get confusing, so it is better to be avoided if we can. So this is how the flowchart looks like for the nested if condition. Here initially a specific condition is evaluated. If the condition is set to true, then it moves to the another if else block. If the condition is set to false, then it moves to another if else block. In this way we can nest the if, elif, else inside another if statement. Let's understand this with an example. Here in this program we input a number using input built-in function. Input built-in function basically accepts a value from the keyboard and check if the number is positive or negative or 0 and display an appropriate message. To implement this particular logic, this time we use nested if statement. Initially, we are assigning a value to a number which is inputted from the keyboard. and then it checks whether the number is greater than 0. If the number is greater than 0, then a nested if condition is evaluated. So let's execute the program and analyze the result. Initially, the program is given a positive number. When the positive number is inputted, then the program checks whether the number is greater than 0. Since the number is greater than 0, inside the if block, it checks whether the number is equal to 0. Since the number is not equal to 0, it will print the else block, that is a positive number. Now let's input a negative number and see what is printed in this case. When we input a negative number, the program checks whether the number is greater than 0. Since the number is not greater than 0, it directly goes to the else block and it prints the negative number. So this is how we can use nested if statement in Python. That's all about using if, elif, else statements in Python. Now let us understand how to use looping concepts in Python. So first of all, let's understand what are loops. Loops are basically a piece of code which can execute a block of code number of times until a certain condition is met. Their usage is common in programming. In Python, we can use for or while loops to achieve looping. Now let us understand how to iterate over a sequence of elements using the different variations of for loop. So what is for loop in Python? So the for loop in Python is used to iterate over a sequence such as list, tuple, string, or other iterable objects. Iterating over a sequence is called traversal. So now let's understand the syntax of for loop. This is how the syntax of for loop looks like. Here, var is the variable that takes the value of the item inside the sequence on each iteration. Loop continues until we reach the last item in the sequence, and the body of for loop is separated from rest of the code using indentation. So this is how we can write the flowchart for the for loop. Here, for each item in a sequence can be a list, can be a string or a tuple. For each item, it checks whether it reached a last item. If the item is not a last item, then the body of the for loop is executed. If the item is the last item, then the body of the for loop is executed. Then it exits from the loop and continues with the remaining unindented statement if provided. Now let's understand this with an example. This is an example using list sequence. And this particular piece of code will find the sum of all numbers stored in a list. Suppose if you are not understanding what are list, tuples and strings, there is a dedicated video which I have prepared. You can go and watch to understand those concepts. Let's understand this code line by line. Here, this is a list of numbers, and initially we have set the sum is equal to 0, and here we are iterating over the items of a list using a for loop. How exactly it works is, the var is basically a variable which holds item one after the other for every iteration, and then it performs the sum of all the items inside the for loop, and the final result is assigned to a variable sum. As we can see in the output, this particular code has performed the sum of all the items inside the list. Similar to the list, we can actually perform the iteration over the strings as well. Here I have created a string Python programming, and it is associated to a variable string. Here I am iterating over the every character of the string, and hence we can see in the output every character of the variable string is printed in the output. If required to take any action depending on a specific character, we can write a code inside the for loop. Now let's understand how to use range function with the for loop. We can generate a sequence of numbers using range function. So range of 10 will generate numbers from 0 to 9. We can also define the start, stop and step size as range. Step size defaults to 1 if not provided, and this function does not store all the values in the memory because it would be inefficient. So it remembers the start, stop, step size and generates the next number on the go. To force this function to output all the items, we can use the function list. So let's understand the range function using an example. Here, this particular example will generate a list of items from 0 to 9 because we have inputted a single argument which is a value 10. Here in this example, we are passing two arguments, that is a start and the stop, and hence this will generate an items of a list starting from the number 1 to 7. Here in this example, we are inputting start and stop, and hence this will generate a list with an elements starting from 10 to 14. In this final example, we are passing three arguments with the first, stop and step parameter. As we can see in the output, this particular function has generated a number between 10 to 100 which are divisible by 5. Meaning with a step of 5, it has generated the numbers between 10 to 100. We can use the range function in for loops to iterate through a sequence of numbers. It can be combined with the len function to iterate through a sequence using indexing. Len built-in function basically gives you a total number of elements in a list or total number of characters in a string and again total number of elements in a tuple and so on. Here in this example, this program will iterate through a list using indexing and it prints the statement inside the for loop accordingly. Here this will iterate over the list using index. Since there are 4 items in a list, len of fruit will return the value 4 and the range of 4 will generate a value from 0 to 3. Since the index of tuple or string or list will start from 0 and this will take all the elements of the variable fruit which is a list and it prints the corresponding value accordingly. So that's how we can use the for loop using the range function. Let's understand how to use for loop with else block. A for loop can have optional else block as well. The else part is executed if the items in the sequence used in for loop exhaust. Break statement can be used to stop a for loop. In such case, the else part is ignored. Hence, a for loop else part runs if no break occurs. So here is an example. Here I have created a list with 3 items 0, 1 and 5. And the for will iterate over all the elements of the list and it prints inside the for loop. As we can see in this example, there is an else block and this else block is executed when all the items in the sequence in for loop exhaust. Here the for loop prints items of the list until the loop exhausts. When the for loop exhausts, it executes the block of code in the else and prints the string no items left. Now let's write a program using the for loop. Here is the Python program to check prime number. This is an example to check whether an integer is a prime number or not using for loop and if else statement. If the number is not prime, it explains in output why it is not a prime number. So what is a prime number? If a positive integer greater than 1 which has no other factors except 1 and the number itself is called a prime number. Meaning if the number is greater than 1 and if it is divisible by 1 and its own number, then it is called as prime number. Example 2, 3, 5, 7, etc. are prime numbers as they do not have any other factors, but 6 is not prime because it is divisible by 2, 3, 1 and 6. This is how the program looks like. In this program, variable num is checked if it is prime or not. Number less than or equal to 1 are not prime numbers. Hence, we only proceed if the number is greater than 1. We check if num is exactly divisible by any number from 2 to num minus 1. If we find a factor in that range, the number is not prime, else the number is prime. We can decrease the range of numbers where we look for factors. In this program, our search ranges from 2 to num minus 1. We could have used the range 2, num divided by 2 or 2, num to the power of 0.5. The later range is based on the fact that a composite number must have a factor less than square root of the number. Otherwise, the number is prime. You can change the value of the variable num in the above code and test for other integers. As we can see in the output, if the number is a prime number, it will print as the number is prime. If the number is not a prime number, then it prints and it tells the number is not a prime number, and also it gives an additional information saying on what number it is divisible. That's all about the for loop. Now let's understand how to use while loops. As we already know, the loops are used in programming to repeat a specific block of code. So the while loop in Python is used to iterate over a block of code as long as the test expression, that is a condition, is set to true. We generally use while loop when we don't know before the number of times to iterate. In for loop, we are sure about how many times we are going to iterate since we are using a sequence. So while we are using a while loop, we are not very sure about how many number of times we are iterating in the loop. This is the syntax for while loop. In while loop, test expression is checked first. The body of the loop is entered only if the test expression evaluates to true. After one iteration, the test expression is checked again. This process continues until the test expression evaluates to false. In Python, the body of the while loop is determined through indentation. Body starts with the indentation and the first unindented line marks the end of the while loop. Python interprets any non-zero value as true and none and 0 are interpreted as false. This is how we can represent the flowchart for while loop. Here initially the test expression is evaluated. If the test expression is set to true, then the body of the while loop is executed. And again, after the execution of the body of while loop, test expression is evaluated, and this will continue until test expression is set to false. Once the test expression is set to false, then it exits from the while loop. So there are certain situations where the test expression is always set to true. In such conditions, it will lead to infinite loop. We will understand how to tackle infinite loop after some time. Now let's understand some examples for while loop. This program will add all natural numbers up to input number. So here we are using an input built-in function to get the number from the keyboard. Initially the sum is assigned to 0 and the variable I is set to 1. And depending upon the input number, so this will calculate the sum of all the natural numbers till this particular number. As we can see here, this will check whether the I initially, which is set to 1, is less than or equal to the number which is inputted. Initially, this particular expression will be evaluated to true, and hence this will execute the statements inside the while block. And it performs the sum of all the numbers till the number which is inputted, and every iteration the I will get incremented. So initially I will be set to 1. In the second iteration, and the I will be set to 2. And it checks whether the number is less than or equal to the inputted number, that is n. Till the point the I is less than or equal to n, this expression will be evaluated to true, and it performs sum of all the numbers. Once the I becomes greater than n, then the while loop will exit. As we can see in the output, when the number is inputted as 10, It will calculate sum of all the natural numbers till the inputted number and it prints the output. In simple terms, what happens in this particular code is the test expression will be true as long as our counter variable I is less than or equal to n, and also we need to increase the value of counter variable in the body of a loop. This is very important most of the times, and this particular expression is forgotten. Failing to do so will result in an infinite loop. And finally, the result is displayed as we can see in the output, and this particular program will calculate the sum of all the natural numbers till the number what is inputted through the keyboard. So now let's understand how to use while loop with a else statement. Same as that of for loop, we can have an optional else block with while loop as well. The else part is executed if the condition in the while loop evaluates to false. The while loop can be terminated with a break statement. In such case, the else part is ignored. Hence, a while loop else part runs if no break occurs and the condition is false. Here is an example to illustrate this. Here we use a counter variable to print the string inside loop 3 times. On the 4th iteration, the condition in while becomes false. Hence, the else part is executed as we can see in the output. Suppose if we use a break statement inside the while, else will not be executed, which we will see in few minutes. That's all about the while loops. Now let's understand some more the control statements which can be used in Python. Let's start with Python break statement. As we already know, the loops iterate over a block of code until test expression is false. But sometimes we wish to terminate the current iteration or even the whole loop without checking test expression. The break and continue statements are used in these cases. Now let's understand how to use the break statement first. The break statement terminates the loop containing it. The control of the program flows to the statement immediately after the body of the loop. If break statement is inside a nested loop, that is loop inside another loop, break will terminate the innermost loop. And the syntax of the break statement is simple. It is just using a break keyword which will perform the break operation. This is how we can represent a break statement through a flowchart. As we can see here, initially a test expression is evaluated, and if the test expression is set to true, then the body of the loop is executed. But in the body of the loop, if the break statement is not present, then the remaining body of the loop is executed. If the break statement is present, then it exits the loop. If the test expression is evaluated to false, then it exits the loop as we already know. The working of break statement in for loop and while loop can be represented like this. As we can see here, in the for loop, if the break statement is present inside a for loop, then codes inside the for loop will not be executed after the break statement, and the control will move out of the loop itself. Similarly in the while loop, so if the break statement is present inside the while loop, as soon as when the program sees the break statement, the remaining lines of code which is there inside the while loop will not be executed, and the control will come out of the loop and it continues unindented statement which is present after the loop. So let's understand this with an example. Here in this example, we iterate through the string sequence. We check if the letter is I, upon which we break from the loop. Hence, we see in our output that all the letters up till I gets printed. After that, the loop terminates. Similarly, we can use the break statement in the while loop as well. So that's all about the break statement. And now let's understand how to use the continue statement. The continue statement is used to skip the rest of the code inside the loop for the current iteration only, and the loop does not terminate but continues on with the next iteration. So the difference between the break and continue statement is The break statement will terminate the loop and it exit from the loop. But in the case of a continue statement, it terminates only the current iteration but continues on with the next iteration. This is the syntax of continue, and this is as simple as writing the continue keyword inside the loop. This is how we can represent the continue statement with the help of a flowchart. Here, when the test expression is set to true and if the continue statement is present, so then it moves to the next iteration. If the continue is not present, then the remaining part of the loop will be executed. As we already know, if the test expression is set to false, then it exits from the loop and it continues with the other unindented statements. So the working of continue statements in for and while loop can be represented like this. As we can see here, in the for loop, if the continue statement is present, then the remaining code inside the for loop will not be executed, and then it directly moves to the next iteration. Similarly, in the while loop, if the continue statement is present, the remaining lines of code will not be executed. Immediately it checks the condition for the next iteration. So let's understand this with an example. Here is a program to show the use of continue statement inside loops. And this program is same as the above example except a break statement. Here in this program, the break statement has been replaced with the continue statement. Here we continue with the loop if the string is I, not executing the rest of the block. Hence, we can see in our output that all the letters except I gets printed. What happens inside the block is, if the value is set to I, then it is telling to continue. Hence, the next statement, that is the print statement, will not be executed, and hence the value I is not printed in this particular case. Similarly, we can use the continue statement inside the while loop as well. So that's all about the continue statement. Now let's understand how to use another control statement, that is a pass statement. The pass statement is very simple statement to understand. It is used as a placeholder for future implementation of functions and loops or classes, etc. In Python programming, pass is a null statement. So the difference between a comment and pass statement in Python is that while the interpreter ignores the comment entirely, whereas the pass statement is not ignored. However, nothing happens when the pass is executed. It results into no operation. So the syntax of the pass is as simple as placing the pass inside a function or inside a for or inside a class for the future use. We generally use it as a placeholder. Suppose we have a loop or a function that is not implemented yet, but we want to implement it in the future, and they cannot have an empty body. The interpreter would complain if there is an empty body inside a loop function or classes. So we use the pass statement to construct a body that does nothing. These are examples which are built using a pass statement. Here in this example, we are doing nothing inside the loop. We are just passing a pass statement. Here in this case, the interpreter will not complain, just it ignores the pass statement. Similarly, here we have created a function and we have just passed a statement pass inside the function. And similarly here I have created a class, but the body of the class contains nothing apart from the pass statement. These all programs are valid in Python. This kind of programs are written during the design phase of software development lifecycle. Now let's understand some of the Python looping techniques. As we already know, Python programming offers two kinds of loop, the for loop and the while loop. Using these loops along with the loop control statements like break and continue, we can create various forms of loop. Now let's understand what are infinite loop. We can create an infinite loop using while statement. If the condition of while loop is always true, we get an infinite loop. As we can see in this example, and this expression will be evaluated always true, and there is no other condition to exit from the loop. Hence, this particular loop is considered to be an infinite loop, And this kind of loops are very dangerous during programming because this program will crash the whole interpreter itself. Now let's understand loop with condition at the top. This is a normal while loop without break statement. The condition of the while loop is at the top and the loop terminates when the condition is false. So this is a program to illustrate a loop with condition at the top. As we can see here, initially I have declared a variable with a value 10 and hence this particular number itself will become a condition. Here I is declared with a value 1 and this program will check whether the number I is less than or equal to the number n which is declared initially. And inside the loop we are incrementing the counter till the point I is less than or equal to n. The while loop will be executed. Once it becomes greater, then the while loop will exit. This is a simple program to calculate sum of all the natural numbers. Now let's understand loop with condition in the middle. And this kind of loop can be implemented using an infinite loop along with a conditional break in between the body of the loop. And this program will illustrate a loop with condition in the middle. This particular program takes an input from the user until vowel is entered. What happens here is, initially I have declared a variable vowels and I have given all possibilities of the characters which is applicable for vowel. And the condition is set to true. Since the condition is set to true, this may result in infinite loop. Since I have mentioned a break inside the loop, whenever this particular condition matches and the loop will terminate. Now let's execute the program and input something which is not an vowel. As we can see here, when the input character is not an vowel, then again it prompts for entering a value. Once the vowel value is inputted, this will exit the while loop. This is how we can use a infinite loop in the real time. Suppose if the program is expecting a certain value from the user, then we can use the while loop like this. So now let's understand how to use the loop with conditions at the bottom. And this kind of loop ensures that the body of the loop is executed at least once. It can be implemented using an infinite loop along with a condition break at the end. And this is similar to do while loop in C. This is a Python program to illustrate a loop with condition at the bottom. That's all for this video. In this video, we have understood how to use the control statement, that is if, elif, else statements. And we have also understood how to perform looping in Python using the concept of for and while. And also we have understood how to use the control statements, break, continue and pass statements with the for and while loop. So that's all for this video. Let us know if you have any questions. Let's meet in the next video. Thank you.